Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Applying Behavior Change Strategies to Improve Single-Family Recycling. My name is Allison Majerus, and I'm a Program Director at the Nebraska Recycling Council. The mission of the Nebraska Recycling Council is to maximize the economic and environmental benefits of resource recovery in Nebraska. I'm so glad you are joining us today to hear from Michelle Metzler, the Director of Community Programs at the Recycling Partnership. Today, she will be sharing new research from the Center for Sustainable Behavior and Impact that can help communities optimize recycling. She will also be sharing information from their recently launched Introduction to Creating More Equitable Recycling Outreach. I want to take a moment to thank the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy for their financial support of the Nebraska Recycling Council this year. With their support, we are able to do programming like this webinar today. I want to let you all know also that we are recording this webinar and we'll post it on our website and on our YouTube channel after the webinar if you'd like to go back and refer to it. If you haven't already, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, and so that we can learn about today's audience and submit questions in the chat throughout the webinar. Now, I was alerted that the chat may not be there, so if the chat is unavailable, please use the question box as an alternative to submit any comments or questions about today's webinar. So with that, I'd like to introduce and give the floor up to our speaker today, Michelle, and she can get started. Thank you all for coming today.
All right, well, thanks everyone for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share some of our research with you today. So, as Allison said, today we're really going to be talking about ways to improve single-family recycling with an emphasis on the partnership's research from the Center for Sustainable Behavior and Impact. And just a little bit more about me before I jump in. So as was mentioned, I work for the Recycling Partnership as a Director of Community Programs. And at the Recycling Partnership, my role is really working with communities to conduct research and implement best practices around recycling programming. I live in Washington State. I've been with the Recycling Partnership for just over a year and a half, and prior to that, spent over a decade working with cities in the Pacific Northwest on recycling. So excited to be with you all from a new part of the country that I have not yet worked in. Okay, so and for those of you who aren't familiar with the Recycling Partnership, essentially we are working to transform the US recycling system. And in order to do that, we need to really work at all parts of the system. So we work with people, communities, MRFs, manufacturers, improvements in the recycling system. And today we're going to be talking specifically about the people in this. So this first bucket here and how people interact with the recycling system. So there's a lot of ways that we can make improvements in recycling. And so the question, why focus on household behaviors, we get a lot because it is really difficult to change people's behavior. A lot of times it seems simpler to play in a different part of the system, but really recycling can only work if everyone can participate. We found that through surveys that we've conducted across the country that recycling is very popular. So majority of people think that recycling is worthwhile, it's worth the effort and has value. the type of programming that we're trying to implement. So now I'm going to share some examples of the research that we conducted in our first year, which was 2022. And hopefully you'll be inspired by some of these programs, and it will give all of these households in every intervention group received the same motivational message as well as information about recycling, but yet an impact was only detected with the empathetic and emotional message group. So what that tells us is that the message really matters. The tactic matters, in that we know that cart tags and mailers can be effective, but I know I personally was surprised that there wasn't any impact in the logical message group, because I know that that's what we often use in the recycling industry. And I think that one of the key things to remember for this is that, we're not the target audience. Those that might be interested in the logic of recycling may not represent our target audience. So that's where the audience segmentation and really researching what would be meaningful to residents is really key. And then we also found in this study that cart tagging was highly memorable. So we did a survey, or a baseline survey, and then a survey post campaign. And we found that 65% of residents recalled receiving a cart tag, which is an extremely high recall for any sort of campaign. So although we found very similar results in the Chicago and Reynoldsburg pilots, we still don't know that this works universally yet. And so we're continuing to we're really excited about the potential for these types of tactics. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about a second body of research, really digging into in-home recycling tools and systems. So there's two pieces of research that I'm going to talk about for this. One is our ethnographic research, and then the second is a pilot that studies really similar types of issues with recycling. So for this ethnographic research, we interviewed 23 households, about half in San Diego, California, and half in Columbus, Ohio. And with these, we had 2-hour sessions with residents in their homes, and it was a combination of conversation and then observation. So tell me about your recycling, and how do you decide if something's recyclable, and really trying to understand the in-home system. And so the 4 systems that residents had could all fall into these 4 buckets. So one is centralized bin free. This is where there's a collection spot for recycling, but there's no bin. So people would collect a series of bottles and cans right next to their garbage bin, or on their counter was another really popular spot for a gathering position. People really liked this system because they didn't have to have a separate bin in their house, and they also said that having the recyclables visible was a prompt to take them out of their household. The disadvantage of this system is there's no prompt for people who don't know what the system is, who may be outside the home, or if there's a household straggler who's not recycling, they might not know what this pile is, so it doesn't necessarily send a signal. Another common system for the home setup was centralize and contain. This is like sort of a twin the bin system where there's one bin for garbage and one bin for recycling. But similar to the centralized bin free system, this one also had advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that it's a clear system, and so it's more visible which one is the recycling, which one is the garbage. It also presents them as equal options. However, depending on how the system was set up, it actually might not be clear to visitors, like which one is the recycling and which one is the garbage, if they're the same color, look the same. And it also makes it easy to contaminate recycling if the garbage is full. So again, like a good system for some, but not necessarily for everyone. Another system that was common was out of sight and isolated, where maybe the household had one bin in the garage and one bin in the laundry room, somewhere that's maybe not easy to access. So with that, recycling, there's less of a chance recycling is going to be accidentally contaminated because it's in an inconvenient location, but it's a little bit more challenging to recycle. And then the last system was distributed gathering, where there were many recycling bins, or not necessarily a bin, but like a basket or a gathering spot throughout the house. This system was correlated with the most recycling success, mostly because recycling is easy and there's reminders throughout the house to recycle. That said, this system also isn't great for everyone, because some people might not have space for all of these bins, or might not know what the different containers throughout the house are really for. And so while I think it was really interesting to learn about all the different in-home systems, really what we found is that there's no system that is a great fit for everyone. And there was no system that was a clear leader in terms of, if a household has this setup, then they're going to be good recyclers. Really, the most important concept was good flow, where households who recycle well are consistently moving recyclables from inside their house to outside their house. So that can be accomplished with any of these systems or another system that residents create. And so I think that really the learning from this for us was that we want to be careful not to prescribe systems, like saying that, you know, for every recycling bin or every garbage bin, a resident should have a recycling bin, because really there's no like data to support that. It's really more about how do we get households to regularly take out recycling, so that recyclables and garbage are all going to their correct place. Last study I'm going to highlight for now is a pilot that we did in Cincinnati, where we looked at in-home bins coupled with motivational mailers and calendars. So Cincinnati has every other week recycling. So with this, we provided, well, I guess to start, all residents were mailed, in the intervention group, were mailed one postcard that promoted an option for a free in-home bin, and then they could opt to receive it or opt not to receive the in-home bin. And then we followed that up with 4 mailings to provide additional clarity on recycling. So 2 of them were calendars that served as a reminder for when to recycle and to hopefully like encourage good flow. And then there were 2 that were motivational messages. We happened to use the empathetic and logical messages with this group. So all households got essentially received the same interventions. This wasn't like an A/B testing type of scenario. But then we looked at the resident set out based on if they opted to receive an in-home bin or opted not to receive an in-home bin, and also compared that with their recycling behavior prior to receiving these interventions. And so what we found was that for people who were actively recycling, so these are households that were setting out recycling more than once per month, it didn't matter if they requested a bin or they didn't request a bin. I guess there was a small increase in households that requested a bin compared to the households that didn't request a bin. However, that difference isn't statistically significant. So really what this means is that if for the households that were already recycling, the motivational messages, the education only, the reminders, essentially increased recycling the same amount as those who also received a bin. The same trends were observed in the infrequent recycler group. These are households that are recycling, but were setting out recycling less than once a month. However, that did not hold true in the non-recycler group. So the non-recycler group were households that were not recycling prior to these interventions. For those households that only received education and messaging, there wasn't an increase in recycling relative to the control. So households didn't start recycling because they received mailers. However, some of these households did start recycling once they received an in-home bin. A caveat here is that they had to opt in to receive an in-home bin. So they were like slightly interested in recycling in order to request an in-home bin. But regardless, those houses that received an in-home bin, some of them did start recycling, which is notable because it takes a significant effort to get a household to go from not recycling to start, especially when compared to getting households to recycle sometimes and then recycle a little bit more. And so I know that I've thrown a lot at you in this first half of the webinar, but really there are 4 key themes that we found throughout all of our research, and all of these are highlighted in our knowledge report, what's available for download on our website or in our Recycling Program Solutions Hub. And really the themes are about having systematic communication. So we have to let residents know how to recycle and how to participate. People have to have confidence in recycling outcomes. So if people think that recycling, if their materials aren't going to get recycled or have doubts about that, they're much less likely to recycle. And I'm sure you all have seen like negative news stories, which are really on the rise in the last several years, which is really dampening people's like positive feedback that they get for recycling and really that reward system. So we need to reassure residents that recycling is worth the effort. Our education and engagement and outreach strategies need to be tailored to different audiences because there's no one thing that's going to work for everyone, but really our messaging and strategies need to be tailored to meet the needs of the audiences that we're trying to reach. And then recycling systems must be designed with behavior in mind. So we need to set the right system, but then also provide the right incentives and motivations and materials so that residents can recycle well. So with that, I'm gonna pause and see if there are any questions from the audience. I think that the chat is not working. Apologies for that. So Allison, did any questions come in that you'd like me to address?
Yes, Haley said, Michelle, there are only a handful of communities in Nebraska that offer curbside recycling. However, I think a lot of your information, like ensuring a good flow of recycling out of the home, could be applied to homes that use drop-off locations. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that conceptually, all of everything that we've discussed applies, regardless of whether the community has curbside service or not. I mean, going back to that like first model that I showed, essentially it's going to be really hard to get people to recycle well if drop-off is the only service, especially if those communities have curbside garbage, because then garbage is the more convenient option. So then it is just very hard to change behavior. It doesn't mean that like motivational messages and things like that can't help nudge people to change behavior, but it's going to be really challenging and require significant investment to change behavior when the system is set up to make garbage easier. But no, I think you're like spot on in terms of like having households having good flow and like using the right motivational messages. That's applicable no matter what the system is.
And then we just have a couple of comments. We had asked people to enter, who they are, where they work. We have Michelle, who works in South Dakota for marketing and sales managing for a recycling company. And she said communities think it's a waste of money because they're not seeing the cost savings via landfill reduction. Morgan, also on the call today, who does sustainability related content creation. And then Haley Nolde, who's our executive director, she has mentioned in the question box that misinformation is a large problem we've noticed, in that there's a lot of confusing education and misinformation. So, and we have more questions coming in here. So I just wanted to share that so you have a better sense of who's on the call today.
Yeah,
Michelle,
thank you.
Morgan asked, is there any data on the outcomes of dual purpose messaging that touches on both reducing consumption and recycling?
I would say that the center and like the partnership really doesn't have any like good data on that. But one of the leaders, I think, in this space is the city of Portland in Oregon. And Portland has done some research about, and they have programming about waste reduction. And essentially in like focus groups and message testing, they found that when you talk about waste reduction and recycling, that people just want to talk about recycling. And they're just thinking about like, I have this stuff, how do I get rid of it? And so really waste reduction, they determined that it needs to be framed as like a totally different issue, and that the concept of waste is really about getting rid of things that are already in the home, versus waste reduction is more like at the store or in a planning stage. So I would really encourage you to check out some of the City of Portland's work. One campaign that I think is particularly well done is called Be Resourceful, and really it's talking about how I don't know how like universal some of these concepts are, but like in Portland, I feel like there's a really like big DIY community, which I feel like would resonate in a lot of places. But so it's really tapping into the ethic of people like to be resourceful. And so like, how do you not really talk about waste reduction, but you talk about being resourceful? in a like an indirect way. And so somebody who's resourceful is going to reuse, is going to maybe buy used. And so it's really like viewed as being a more positive thing. So that's like sort of a long answer that may or may not really get to your question, but I think that based on Portland's research, it seems like there's benefit to separating them. But I don't know that that has like really been well documented or researched outside of some of these small community programs.
Michelle Morgan thanks you and says that's helpful. I'm a zero waste nerd and I typically view those as separate issues too. So I wanted to see if that was kind of the same stance here. So yeah.
I would think so. And I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot more research that needs to be done in that area. So.
We have another question from Karina. She says, you mentioned that pairing bins in home doesn't necessarily equate to higher participation. Do you know if this is true for public places and businesses?
No, I do not know that that is true, but my guess is that it would not apply because in a household, you know, most households are small, people are familiar with the space. So like if I were to set up a system, I would probably tell my family members about what that system is versus like in a public place, you don't have that, you know, those tight knit relationships. And so if you had a system where like recycling was only in the back office, people wouldn't know about that, you know, versus like you could maybe get away with that in your laundry room. So I think that like there has been quite a bit of research done by Keep America Beautiful and by Kirk. I can't remember what that stands for, but it's College University Recycling Coalition, perhaps, that really put an emphasis on having like twin bins with a real clear color coding system. And their research shows that like the system should be as harmonious as possible throughout like a campus or an office building to make sure that the containers are recognizable. So I think like inside the home, that research is just helpful for like thinking about messaging or thinking about tools and support for residents, but I don't think that it applies for public place recycling.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. I think we can move on. And if people have more questions about this first section, they can continue to submit them, but I know you have more to share with us.
Great, sounds good. Thanks so much for your questions. Okay, so next we are going to talk a little bit more about creating equitable outreach. So the partnership last month, I believe, maybe it was 2 months ago at this point now, but just released a introduction to creating more equitable recycling outreach that's supported by essentially the need to have more equitable outreach, but really it's meant to be an introduction as this is a long journey and, you know, there's no simple solutions that I can provide to really like solve for this, but I hope that again, this can help you think about the challenge and opportunity in a little bit different way. So the US population is becoming more diverse every day, and this trend will only continue into the future. So this map is provided by the US Census Bureau and shows the diversity index of each state. And so you can see there that you're this nice medium green. And so with 40% of Nebraskans being people of color, you know, really across all states, there's a need to have education and outreach and recycling messaging that really resonates with a wider audience. And so really depending on the program and depending on the community, barriers to recycling might be something different than what we may think of as just being like a generic barrier to recycling. And this is where the really understanding the audience is key to having success in reaching them. So barriers to recycling could look like a lack of access or knowledge about how to recycle properly due to like language or cultural context being missing. It could look like out-of-pocket or perceived costs of recycling, including bags, service, taxes, or time. And I think one thing here that I just want to emphasize is it could be perceived cost. I think this is an area where we don't have enough data, but I think that opt-in recycling programs, even when free, could be perceived as a as a cost, even though it's actually free. So that could be a barrier. Additionally, social pressures and frustrations, not just for seeing others recycle, but feeling judged for not recycling or for recycling. So in some cultural groups, it could be seen as a negative to recycle, as well as to not recycle. And so really understanding cultural contexts. And because of all of the varied cultural contexts, there is no one size fits all strategy or solution to have equitable outreach. So looking at outreach through a DEIB lens is ensuring that the resources that are available are easy to use, culturally appropriate and relevant, and readily available for different audiences as like a baseline entry point to start. And then as communities get a little bit more like deeper into this work, it looks like engaging diverse audiences in effective and respectful ways, seeking partners to collaborate and co-create, and then finding ways to embed equity into program strategies. I think that the collaboration and co-creation pieces are really, great places to start as well, and that we want to make sure that recycling outreach and materials are culturally relevant, and if they're co-created, that's going to make work a lot easier and also more meaningful. So not all marketing is designed equitably, and equitable outreach is best achieved through research, participatory design, and co-creation. And so really, again, like getting communities involved, especially from underrepresented groups, is really going to help this process be more successful. So the partnership has our new guide, which is called the Introduction to Creating More Equitable Recycling Outreach. And really it's designed to provide guidance to help you and local program coordinators tailor public engagement strategies while also offering tips and data and insights to help improve the effectiveness of campaigns, and then also to help you get support internally within your program if there's resistance to investing in various strategies. And throughout the report, there's really ties to a few key themes. One being that each priority audience is different, and so we'll need a custom approach. So, we can't just have all group different audiences together and assume that one approach will meet all of their needs. So really looking at with different groups within the community and taking a different approach with each of those groups. Effectively reaching individuals requires a welcoming approach. So making sure that as you're approaching others, that you've done your homework on really what sort of engagement you're looking for, and also making sure that we're not putting too much of a burden on those that we're seeking to support when developing these strategies. And then lastly, inclusive multicultural outreach must take the complexities of reality that people face every day into account. And so again, just being aware of the complexities that multicultural audiences face will really help ensure that messaging and strategies effectively resonate. So the guide is now available on our website. You can reach it, you can view it at this URL that's listed here on the slides, or just by visiting our website and searching for the Equitable Outreach Guide. And so again, it's really meant to just provide like a baseline and place for you to start looking at this topic. But we intend to continue to work more in this space and hope to have more resources available to communities in the future. It includes a 5-step process to help communities get started, and there's also access to a library of resources, which includes photos both of people who are recycling, as well as different materials that different cultural groups may find as being recyclable, and as well as messaging in Chinese, Spanish, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. All right, I'm just gonna go over one more quick area, and then we'll have some time again for questions. So lastly, I just wanted to share the Partnerships Recycling Program Solutions Hub, which is designed to help community programs access resources and information that the partnership has about how to improve recycling. And so With this, if you haven't checked it out already, I'd encourage you to create a login. It has all of the resources that are available on our website, as well as data about community recycling programs from our national database. And the other piece of it is that this tool provides data on what's accepted in each community for recycling, and recycling coordinators have the ability to edit that list. One of the things that the partnership is working on is called it's a label called Recycle Check, where residents can scan the label and then see if the material is accepted in their community. So it provides a greater level of granularity than something like the How to Recycle label, which might say check locally. But this only works if communities update their accepted lists. And we've started that based on a tool that we've created, but when communities verify it, then we know that the information is even more readily available. This is a little screenshot of Recycle Check and what that looks like, and in terms of the resident-facing application of it. So then this is where you can go to create an account in the Recycling Program Solutions Hub and really look at information about your program, peer programs, and get access to the partnership's resources. So the center just launched last year. We're really just getting started. And so we anticipate continuing to do research along these same lines. And so we hope that you'll stay with us, follow our research, and be a part of us developing more solutions for communities. So downloading the knowledge report is the first place that I would start. It's a great resource that covers some of the studies that I highlighted today, but as well as all of our other pilots and research that we didn't talk about, to really hopefully deepen your understanding of the current state of recycling and where there are really opportunities for improvement and how we need to do better to serve residents. Also, you can sign up for an account with the Recycling Program Solutions Hub to access resources and verify your recycling lists. And then we've also just started a monthly webinar series. I hope some of you joined us for our first one just a few weeks ago, but we have another one on October 25th where we're going to be talking about a little bit more about in-home recycling systems. So digging into our ethnographic research a little bit deeper, as well as looking at Cincinnati and a few other pilots where we used in-home bins, and to understand more about how people recycle and come up with systems inside their home. So I hope you will join us for that. And with that, we'll open it back up to questions. And again, I just want to thank everyone for letting me be here today and participating in this webinar. And also, thanks for all the great work that you're doing to improve recycling programs in your own communities.
Thank you, Michelle. I think everyone can agree that you provided a wealth of data that we can really dig into after this. So to answer some people's questions, this webinar recording will be available after today. We'll put it on YouTube and then on our website under webinars as a resource. So if you know people who you think would love to watch this later, you can go back. Hopefully I'll have it up today or tomorrow for anyone's watching. And we do have a question or two, but I just want to mention, Michelle, I was really excited when the equitable toolkit came out 2 months ago, just because of the work that I've been doing at NRC, reaching out and learning about the disability community and their experience with recycling. Oftentimes that's a segment of the population that we may not think about in terms of addressing their concerns and how they recycle and barriers they might come up against when recycling. And so I was excited to see that the recycling partnership is aiming to become more equitable, encouraging people to become more equitable with their programming for recycling. And what you mentioned about collaborating and co-creating with communities directly is valuable, is important. I totally support that. So I do have a question here, or some questions. Haley says, thank you for touching on the idea that one size does not fit all. I agree that a custom approach is needed for each community. for educators or recycling managers with limited time, what are the first things they should focus on when trying to communicate more effectively with their residents?
Well, I think the first thing you should do is check out the Equitable Outreach Guide if you haven't done that already. But I think that you know, everyone's operating with like limited time and limited resources, and so I think that starting with the audience that maybe has never been supported. So like if you've already translated materials into one language, but you have 6 key languages spoken in a community, like picking another one where resources haven't been provided in the past, or just picking one if it's totally new work. So I think starting with really like asking people what they need to recycle better. Is it translated materials? Is it trans-created materials? Is it some sort of, so like asking how you can support residents is really, I think, the best way to start. But I feel like at a really basic level, I think the least we can do to reach different audiences is translation and transcreation. And for those of you not familiar with transcreation, transcreation is a really key concept and something that the partnership is working on, and we hope to have more resources available to share with you soon. Although there are some like basic elements in that Equitable Outreach Guide, but transcreation is where you include not just translations, but also cultural relevance and context. So like if there's a community or ethnic group that doesn't buy milk, for example, like milk is just like not a product that's consumed. If you say like recycle milk jugs, like that, it doesn't mean anything. And so really taking into account the products that people consume really helps make something recognizable. Or like one of the things that we found is a lot of the like cereal boxes, like that's another example, like something that like might not be universally consumed. And so making sure that when we say plastic bottles and jugs, that like we provide examples that have that cultural relevancy and that are going to be common in households that are from a different like culture or ethnicity that's in your community.
Going along with what you're talking about when it comes to translations, I did put a document in the chat for people, and if you don't see it, you can email me, but there is a report listing the diversity of languages spoken in Nebraska that I found that came out in 2021, which can be really helpful for individual communities who are looking to serve their. Oh, thank you for. Did you open that?
I didn't know.
There you go. There it is.
I'll pretend that was coordinated. Look at this.
So, yes, I should have just not been surprised. Yes, this is the document I was talking about. So you can go through it and find the county that you work in or the county that you're interested in to see who speaks what language in each community in Nebraska. So I found that to be a really cool resource for people to go and look at. Any other questions we have? We have 7 minutes left, so this is people's chance to submit anything else. Can give them a couple moments. I'm gonna review my notes and see if there was anything else I wanted to mention. Any other questions? While we're waiting to see if there's any other questions, I am gonna do a quick promotion for our next webinar, which is on Wednesday, October 18th, on the importance of recycling electronics with Matt Weirman from SADOF, e-recycling and data destruction. That'll be on Wednesday, October 18th at noon, and I'll put the webinar registration link in the chat. It's also on our website. So if you'd like to come back in 2 weeks and learn about electronics recycling, please do that. Any other questions? I don't want to cut people off early, but. Okay. Well, we want to thank you, Michelle, for speaking today, sharing what you and the Recycling Partnership have worked hard on in the last couple of years, and we're just thankful for your time today and what you shared. So have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Stay in touch.
Bye.